And also I watched some of the recording and realized how empty this table with our physical distancing was. So I added some decorations to the middle. Giovanna, along the back side here, you can notice some of your mugs that you gave me. These are for us to read our tea leaves to determine our fate. So if you remember Professor Trelawney, she had the yes. Actually, she'll be here in about 45 minutes, right as we end. She's gonna take us all to dinner. And then also I have here some Quidditch balls for you guys to look at. So I'll change out these decorations that you get to look at each week, just as I kind of move things around this room. But we also have a movie theater poster of The Prisoner of Azkaban that, I don't know, Giovanna, how did you procure that poster?
A guy that I worked with is a poster junkie, and it had come damaged. And so he asked if I wanted it, and I said, I know someone who would love it, even if it's damaged. But it was used in a movie theater.
Right, and it came out on Chris's birthday, so that's fun too. And the funny thing we realized today, and part of why maybe even the echo is even worse than we could have imagined, is that that wall is metal. Because those strips that hold the poster up are magnetic, and therefore it just stuck. Well, it still needed the hook because it's not strong enough, right. But yeah, it's a metal wall. So we've actually been adding some sound dampening supplies.
No phone is connected. Connecting.
Supplies to the wall, and that'll continue to get better.
Connection failed.
Adding some on the ceiling soon. So each week, Zoom might sound better.
Power off.
All right, so let's dig in. I think we're going to have to talk a little bit about the book today, more than in the past. Hi, Lois, also hello. Not because I want to leave people out, but because I want to include people. We get to a book now where there are some key parts that just get overlooked in the movie or glossed over so quickly that you kind of miss some of the meaning. And so today, I want to start by explaining what happened when Harry's parents died in relation to his friends, to James Potter's friends. So James and Lily are Harry's parents. James was best friends with 3 other guys at Hogwarts, and they were Peter Pettigrew and Sirius Black and Remus Lupin. So the 4 guys were best buds, and those 4 guys together called themselves the Marauders. And Professor Snape is not their friend. We find out more later on their drama, and you do see that in the movies, that they don't get along, and now you're starting to sense that Harry is not really favored by Snape, not necessarily because Harry is a good guy, but because Harry might be just like his dad's son. So we're still not really sure what's going on with Snape, but we do know, and we start to sense that Snape and James Potter were not friends. Okay, so the 4 of those boys all hung out at school. And then once they all finished Hogwarts, moved on with their lives, and Voldemort is kind of on the rise the first time, Harry and his parents are in danger. And with the help of Dumbledore, who we find out in the first book and movie that Dumbledore had that cloak, the invisibility cloak. Dumbledore had the cloak, and while James and Lily and Harry are in their house, Voldemort comes and kills them. And Harry gets a curse, and then Harry goes to live with the Dursleys. So we talked about all of that before, but just as a little more backstory to figure out those 4 friends, because it's pretty meaningful to figure out the arc of the storyline as we continue, if you really can understand a bit more than what the movies tell you about these 4 guys. So Sirius Black, this prisoner of Azkaban, he was Harry's dad's best friend. And then Remus Lupin, and then like the 3rd friend would have been Peter Pettigrew. He was kind of an annoying little boy, but he was still their bud. They were all together. But what we find out in this book, and the movie explains it, but just kind of too quickly, is that Peter started turning towards Voldemort's side and then ended up betraying James and Lily by telling Voldemort where to find them. There was a protective charm on the house, but because Peter Pettigrew was the one that knew exactly where they were, and they call it a secret keeper, that's why Voldemort could attack. But the drama came in for all these 12, 13 years because everyone had assumed that Sirius Black was the secret keeper. And so they assumed that Voldemort found them because the secret was broken, and they assumed it was Sirius's fault, not Peter Pettigrew's fault. Meanwhile, we've got Remus Lupin. He's a great friend too, but he's a werewolf. And when the boys figure out that their friend is a werewolf, instead of shunning him, they decide, we're going to try and help you. And so they actually learn how to turn themselves into animals to be out in the wilderness with their werewolf friend. So that's when Sirius learns how to become a dog, and James learns how to become a stag, and Peter becomes a rat. And the advantage of Peter being a rat is that Peter was able to make that whomping willow that has its freak out limbs, make it subside by touching a certain spot on the tree to calm it, because he was little and he got to that spot. And then they could all go into the Shrieking Shack and kind of hang out. So they were not the best boys on campus, but they meant well. And they got in a lot of mischief, right? So mischief managed. I have on my shirt today. And so they're all good friends, but Peter ends up betraying when they grow up. And so I just wanted to fill in a little bit of those gaps, because if you've only watched the movies, you might not have quite connected all of that, because when they're in the Shrieking Shack at the very end, the dialogue is fast.
Right.
And it's not as thorough as it is in the book. So I just wanted to summarize some of those key points a little bit before we move on. And if anybody else has read the books and thinks there's something else I missed, just to help build that context before we continue with the conversation, I think some of those pieces get unnoticed when you've only watched the movies once or twice and never read the books.
It was very puffy for me.
Yeah.
I said,
So
wait
do
a
you have any
minute.
other questions?
I was asking her earlier, I was picking her brain. I said, so tell me again how this all works with these guys. But I think I understand it now. I mean, we were so looking at Sirius as the bad one. And I said, oh no, he's Harry's godfather, another person to let him down. So it was kind of cool to realize at the end that it wasn't actually him.
Yeah.
So I think I'm pretty clear on it.
Yeah.
It was a lot going on at the end of the movie.
Yeah. Well, and you just uncover so many secrets there at the end. Yeah.
There was twist.
Right. And although this book has a lot of components to it, they all just converge in one instant, basically. And almost everything kind of becomes clear within one chapter in a way.
I was a little confused about the werewolf. I guess it's Lupin,
Yeah.
right? No, he's only a werewolf on full moon night, like typical
Right.
werewolf style, right?
What happens is Snape delivers him a potion every
Okay.
month.
Oh.
He gets the
okay.
Wolfsbane potion.
Okay.
And
That's why they
that-
said, did you take your potion?
Yeah, because that keeps his mind. He didn't take the potion that night, and that's
Any
why.
reason why,
He
or?
got distracted by the map. He saw the map and he saw that Harry and Peter were going towards
Were
the
the
same,
same
and he wanted to go
Okay.
rescue. And I guess he saw
forgot.
Sirius pop up on the map too.
Okay,
So yeah,
okay.
he got
That makes
distracted.
sense.
That's another cool situation because normally he has his mind and like he's okay. Like the
Right.
Wolfsbane potion, like
It makes him sleepy, like go into a coma state
Yeah.
almost.
But he was new at the school this year. He was a new professor, Lupin.
Yeah,
wasn't he?
it's also
So he just
nice
came
that
out of the woodwork type thing, or?
kind of
Unexplained a bit.
Right, yeah.
Wasn't he shunned by
Right.
the basic
Community.
community?
Right.
So,
But he was known to be friends with the Potters, right? So
Yeah.
everybody
yeah,
No,
but
I
he
mean-
was-
the thing with the Potters is like they weren't like famous people until after their death. Like it's not like everyone like knew the Potters. Like
They just happened to have money, but they weren't necessarily.
they weren't even like super ultra rich either. Like not compared to the Malfoys or anything. The Malfoys are like crazy rich. Harry just is wealthy, like wizarding standards.
I think also just, we have to continue to remember, sometimes there aren't pieces that we know the full
Right,
story of.
right.
Yeah.
Like he just shows
Yeah.
up to teach at the school.
So the main thing to remember about Lupin teaching at the school is that we have now seen 3 professors in that position.
Right.
We saw Quirrell, and then we saw Lockhart,
Right.
and now we've seen a new one. And if you've seen all the movies, you know, I mean, we're gonna
How
see a
this
lot of
goes.
different teachers.
Yeah, okay.
And so, so the bottom line is, he must have been doing something worthy of getting the position, because when he is there, the kids say, well, this is the first time we've really learned a lot of
Right.
Defense Against the Dark Arts. So they like him as a professor. So he must have been studying something or had some kind of opportunity to prove himself. And we also find out, and I don't remember how the line is presented in the movie or the book exactly word for word, but it was like, well, Professor Snape let it slip that I'm a werewolf, when Harry and Lupin meet at the end, and they say, wait, you're not coming back next year? Well, no, Professor Snape let it slip that I'm a werewolf, so the parents are not gonna want me here. So that's to assume, it's not like everyone did know he was a werewolf already, but maybe he looked ragged. So they talked about how ragged his clothes were at the beginning, and he was, you know, sleeping on the train or whatever. I'm sure that was kind of fake, but he was, you know, he was like a rough kind of guy and seemingly impoverished. But I wonder if that had more to do with him trying to protect other people by trying to stay on the fringes versus people telling him he had to stay on the fringes, because he wasn't, if Snape says, oh, I let it slip, or he, you know, Snape now lets people know, then that means they must not have been.
He must have been hiding it.
So maybe also if he knew every month he was gonna do this, he didn't want to have a regular job. You know, like, let's say, you know, you always get routine migraines or whatever, it's harder to hold a regular job because they might fire you. So that may be part of why he was poor too. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure there's some, throughout one of the books, I'm pretty sure there's like some line about him not being able to hold down a job due to like prejudices against
Yeah, that
werewolves.
was,
There's some,
yeah,
there's
that
some line
was-
there.
Right, but that's
And-
after this one. I think that's when they're talking about what he's up to, like in the next one.
I think what Snape is when Snape has that lesson with them and tells them like the signs of how to spot a werewolf, I think that might be one of the ways that like Snape let it slip that he's a werewolf.
Right. Well, and that's one of the key themes through this story. So there's 3 things today thinking about would be Dumbledore. We haven't really talked a ton about Dumbledore, but I want to talk about Dumbledore today and about, you know, the man of second chances, and us to think back to the first 3 stories and what are all these opportunities where Dumbledore has been giving multiple chances to people. And then the heaviest hitting theme through this one is the justice versus injustice, because we see that play out at the end with Sirius. But what other characters do we see that with as well? And then also the theme of suspense, in the sense that we're uncovering a lot of truth in this story. And so as we talk through things, I want us to be thinking about that. But we also have this whole idea of like overcoming bad experiences and fears too, because then we have the whole subplot of Harry trying to figure out how to deal with Dementors. So there's a lot of components that go on in these stories that, you know, we can spend hours talking about any one of them. Yeah. So what else stood out to anyone, or to start the conversation, what were you thinking today would be something, oh, I want to make sure we talk about this? Anybody come with an idea?
And that's, the Patronus. And I know I'm moving towards the end.
No, it's fine.
But when, Harry sees a figure that kind of looks like him, he assumes it's his father casting the Patronus, he was trying to think. And then he finds out it's really him who cast it.
Yeah.
But the word expecto patronum, or expecto patronum or whatever, expecto means to wait upon or expecting, and patronus, a patron or a father, expecting the father. Interesting. And I thought that was really interesting because he was only able to cast that giant patronus at the end because he knew he had already did it. He knew his father was, he thought his father, because he knew it was already done.
Right.
he was able to do. And kind of doing the analogy with the power of the Holy Spirit. And because we know God has done these things before, we have confidence in power to do very difficult.
Yeah,
And I thought that was really
Good point.
interesting.
that is really beautiful. Can you?
Could you sum that up?
Sure. So if you think about the way that the spell sounds with expecto sounding like expecting or awaiting something, and then patronum, so the father, it's like expecting the father. And because Harry was able to know that he had already cast that Patronus charm before because of that whole time travel anomaly that we aren't going to try and wrap our heads around too much. There's plot holes there. But because he knew he had already done it before, he had that confidence that he could do it again, even though he'd really only done it once. But knowing that, like, through the power of God's previous works, we know and we have confidence that he will continue to see us through now. And I think that that's really important because, so now I'll move on to my thoughts. That wasn't what Christy said. I'll keep going now. When we think about the Dementors, and I don't think it's a line in the book, but I did like the line in the movie because it kind of helped to summarize a little bit more. When Professor Lupin and Harry are talking about the Patronus and the Dementors, when they first had their lesson on how to defeat it, Lupin had expected that Harry's boggart, the thing that scared him the most when it came out of the cupboard, was going to be what? Voldemort. And he'd worried that the other students were going to see that and be frightened. But instead, it was a Dementor. And I don't necessarily agree with the line itself, but Lupin said, oh, well, that's very noble of you because what that shows is the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. And I mean, I do think that a Dementor is more than just fear. I do think it's not just an absent worry. I think that there's more to the Dementor than that, but it does tie back with what Christy was saying in the sense of, like, really that absence of fear is what we get in the presence of God. Like that was such a cool point to come across, and whether she meant it that way or not, it's really fun when we make these connections. Yeah, it's really cool. I like that. Anything else about the Dementors?
I needed them.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like they're sucking the
I
air,
know.
their spirit right out of you, and I thought, oh, that's a weird thought. Because I right away went to the spirit
Mhm.
rather than just the breath.
Oh,
The spirit is coming out of you, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
right.
The Dementors, they suck out like happiness, and like there's like the Dementors kiss is like they take your soul. It's like
Yeah, well, that's what
that's how it looks, right? That's what mine does, like, because it just leaves the body like an empty husk afterwards.
Right.
They did a good job depicting the fear, I think, of the Dementors in the movie, right?
Right.
They were pretty fearful, I think.
And with Harry blacking out,
Yeah.
Right?
yeah, and I think that there's these times where we kind of have to discredit Hermione a little bit, because as well-intentioned as she is with her academics, she doesn't always have empathy. She doesn't really seem to present the ability in these early books, especially. She'll either chastise Ron because he's too slow at something or whatever, and she does the same thing to Harry on the train, and like, there weren't any voices, Harry.
Right.
Or when we get to later when she's like, well, I can't see that thing, so it must not be there. Like, she can't wrap her head around the fact that there could be something she's not experiencing. I think that that's.
But they don't see the Dementor on the train.
No,
When
they
Harry,
They can see it,
yeah, I was confused
If he's a
because.
Dementor, he has that experience in
like a flashback.
Okay.
But the
So they don't
Dementors-
hear what he's hearing, they don't see what
No,
Harry.
it's just in his head. Also, like, Hermione is in the movie, it won't show this as much because what they did in the movie a lot of the times is they took things that Ron did, like good characteristics of Ron, like loyalty, like, and they just gave them to Hermione, made Ron more of like a comedic.
Kind of
side
even out the,
character.
yeah.
But Hermione in the books is very stubborn. She's very book smart, but she doesn't have like that emotional capacity. Or
Common sense.
yeah, she's very like path of mind. Like you can see this in the first book when Ron, like she's like, there's no wood in here to light a fire when they got trapped in the devil's snare, and Ron is the one to remind her that there's like you can light a fire because there's like she has a
You're a
wand.
spell, yeah.
Yeah, you're a witch. Like light a fire. She's very like one track mind. Like first thought is like her best thought.
I thought of it in the sense of, because of her book smart, she's the type of person who says, well, if you can't prove it to me in black and white, such as the existence of God,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you can't prove it to me in black and white, so therefore it does not exist.
Right.
I can't see it, it's not there.
Remember this conversation when we get to the 5th one, okay? Because I want us to go there when we talk about Dumbledore's army, okay? So we're gonna get into that, where we see what Hermione's traits versus Harry's traits and experiences are in relation to how they're gonna keep moving forward in their story.
I didn't like how the teachers sort of ran over her, because she's going, I know that answer. Does anyone have the answer? Oh, yes, I know. And, you know, they said, this is enough. You know, you're smart. We all know you're smart,
Yeah.
but we don't really want to talk to you.
A lot of the times it's Snape, especially because Snape is so like against Gryffindor as a house, pretty much any other house really except Slytherin.
Yeah, he's pretty biased.
Just a little, just a little.
Well, he's held on to pain his whole life and just can't get past it.
Snape is a very complex character, like one of the most complex characters.
Yeah.
He's in conflict a lot.
Yeah. Well, okay, so now we've talked about Snape for a second, because everyone knows how it ends, but assuming we've only made it through 3, let's talk like this. What do we know about Snape so far? Because in the very beginning, we saw Harry at the house table after he's gotten sorted, when they just got there, and he's looking over, and in that moment, he sees Quirrell with the turban on, but he also sees Snape, and his scar starts to hurt. And then he's like, who's that professor? But he immediately is making like a judgment that the bad guy is Snape, right? Because he's looking at him. But later we kind of were like, oh yeah, it's Quirrell. That might have been the tension in the head, not Snape.
But he had met Quirrell before.
He did.
In the cauldron, and didn't get a reaction from the scar. So his assumption was that it had to be Snape.
Correct. And then he, confirmed his frustration with this guy the next day when he starts being rude to him in class. And then what are some of our other encounters with Snape so far?
He was actually trying to save them with the Quidditch. He was saving
Right.
the invitation to try to save him, because he saw that there was somebody else.
But Hermione and Ron were assuming Snape was the one casting the curse, so they go and put the robes on fire. Yeah. And then what else have we seen Snape doing so far?
Well, he caught Harry in the hallway, right, this time, right?
Right,
And he touched
right.
him, and he was out sneaking around looking for, with his light up wand.
Yeah. And he's got the map at that point.
He's got the map at that point.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I listened to these books on audio, and I guess because I just always hated getting in trouble when I was little, I don't know. But there's a part in the book that is missing from the movie, where it's literally showing and talking about Harry going back and forth to Hogsmeade or whatever. And Snape really does catch Harry coming back. He's muddy and whatever. And I have to skip that part every time. Like I have to fast forward through, because it just makes me so anxious with how Harry handles that situation, how he's truly in the wrong and Snape is right, but Snape's mean or whatever. But I just hate that part where I'm like, Harry, you just should have stayed home. You didn't need to go there. You didn't need that butterbeer.
Up to no
He was
good.
up to no good. Yeah.
Well, and I was gonna say too that he was talking about Harry making assumptions. I think that Harry, Hermione, and Ron all make some wild assumptions, and it's good writing that a lot of their assumptions work out for whatever reason. But it's like, why are you even assuming this?
Right, and I know Brad mentioned the first week about, what would have happened if Harry and Malfoy had at least been cordial classmates, with the last book and movie, what could have happened or the sixth one, what could have happened for Malfoy's fate had Harry at least been friendly to him. I think the same can be questioned. What could have happened if Harry could have just given Snape the benefit of the doubt a little bit? You just kind of wonder what that would have been like. But instead, driving him through at least until the end of book 5, we're still watching Harry distrust everything about Professor Snape, and it's building. He's getting more and more ammunition as to why he doesn't trust this guy. And yet he continues to trust Dumbledore and consider what Dumbledore has to say to be true. And so let's talk, and Cameron's not here today, but he says the failed pedagogy at Hogwarts. So he's always like, these professors are terrible. Like they really kind of are, right? They really are. All this stuff. But like, think about what Dumbledore has done to these children. They come back, they're in the hospital. Harry's just nearly died from a Dementor attack. And the time turner, we can't wrap our heads around that too much. We're not going to go there because time travel, whatever. But Harry's like sick in the hospital. And then Hermione says, no, we can, we got to fix this. And then Dumbledore's like, all right, go ahead. Like, why did he not fix it, right?
I'm not gonna tell you what you have to do, but go ahead and do it, right?
Dumbledore is he's the chess master. Everyone else is a pawn.
He's a manipulator.
You go through things, and he'll just watch, like supervise.
Right.
Yeah, he throws them to the wolves quite often.
Yeah.
I feel like he does it to build Harry up because he knows what Harry has to face eventually.
Okay.
I feel like it's
all part of the teaching and
he
molding.
definitely
of
has a
Harry.
plan.
And maybe he would have been right there it's a story written by one lady. There's
Right.
no alternate universe here, but had they have been failing, would he have just known and
Maybe
swooped
he
in?
was watching from afar the whole time.
Or how much had Lupin and Dumbledore already been in communication?
You don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. But we see that Snape is so frustrated that Lupin's in that castle. We do see that. When the kids are all hanging out in the Great Hall and Harry's faking sleeping, and Snape says, I warned you about this guy coming into the castle, meaning Lupin. And then Harry's sitting there, well, wait, what about Professor Lupin?
I thought Lupin also, on an emotional level, was seeing Harry as his father.
Yeah,
And that brought back all the pain he had suffered from the teasing, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah.
So it was a mixture for him, I don't think he could control it at that point. It was such a deep wound for him that it just kept coming up. No matter
Yeah.
how much he tried to put it away, it just come up.
Well, an ignored wound for so many years too.
Sure. I'm sorry. I thought I was muted. Mark
Oh.
asked me a question about what y'all were talking about, and I gave him my opinion.
Oh.
I'm mute.
Okay. I thought, another element of, religious symbolism in there was Harry on the train. Oh, wait, we never really finished that. I like the popcorn style. There's no way to do this better, I don't think. I think we just need to think of things, you talk about it because every theme kind of weaves through. Then we talk about a character and then we talk about a plot. So let's go back to the train and the Dementors, because Harry is paralyzed from hearing his mother's scream in his head, because that's him reliving his worst memory. Whereas for Ron, he's on the train and the worst thing he's hearing is his twin brothers bullying him maybe, or like his parents having an argument one night. Like he hasn't necessarily had trauma in the same way. Or maybe Hermione's feeling, things about fear of her parents being muggles, that kind of thing. So they're not feeling like deep trauma like Harry. And that's why Harry almost passes out or does pass out and hears his mother screaming. But they don't hear that. And so then what does Lupin do when Harry wakes up?
Gives him chocolate.
He gives him chocolate.
Yep.
Honeyduke's chocolate, right?
Chocolate makes everything better, right?
Chocolate makes everything better.
You just said that Ron had a twin brother.
No, his twin brother.
Two twins, the old.
Yeah, just saying that the twins giving him a hard time might be part of his worst memories.
Like that makes sense why he fainted and they wouldn't, because he has the worst memories, right? The worst.
Harry's really very
Right.
rough life.
Yeah,
He's
I mean,
also
that makes sense.
He's also the youngest of the boys.
Oh, Ron.
Ron, yeah, so we
So
all
he's
know,
the target, of
yeah, well,
course.
we know what happens.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, another cheap shot of Bible symbolism that's not as good as the one Christy brought up, but just thinking of like, I am the bread of life with the fact of, if we go back to the Dementor attacks and talking about the Patronus charm that we use to defeat it, we also have another weapon with us to defeat that sense of fear and devastation that comes on from the Dementor. Then we have the chocolate as well. So the Patronus charm is the end all be all, but also we have God's word in our heart. So the chocolate kind of too, that like helps to defeat that feeling of loss. So it revives you. An element that I think is funny that they do say in the book that they don't say in the movie is that Harry does end up in the hospital to get checked out when he gets off the train. And there's all these professors and the matron in the hospital that are like, oh, Lupin, he might actually be a decent professor this year. He knew to give Harry chocolate, like, check, this is better than Lockhart already, so there's like some humor in that gets missed in the movie. Yeah, I thought that was funny. So we fast forwarded to the train. We did not talk about the very beginning. I had one other gap I wanted to fill in related to the book that makes it a little bit confusing with the Peter Pettigrew rat thing and how the rat ended up with Ron. Okay. We don't know exactly how the rat ended up with Ron, but what we do know is that Peter, on the night that Voldemort attacked Harry's parents, there was an explosion of some kind. Sirius got arrested, but Peter disappeared. And he didn't really disappear. They all thought he got blown up and all that was left was a finger, but really he didn't get blown up. He just lost a finger and went into hiding as a rat. And it's assumed that he wanted to find a wizarding family to camp out with, to just lay low and listen for the news and be part of the wizarding world, but still a rat. And so when the trio is in Diagon Alley before they go to Hogwarts, third year, they are figuring out why this rat is getting sick and he's not eating and he's acting weird. And basically, well, rats shouldn't live to be as old as they are, but nobody's really questioning that. But we find out later it's not a rat, it's a human, and that's why the rat's living so long. So this rat has ended up with Harry's friend, and so they're in the same dorm together, and this Peter Pettigrew could have been there to like kill Harry at any moment if he really wanted to, but that's not what his end game is. He just, a Voldemort lackey. But the other component of that as to how Sirius escaped Azkaban, that's not so clear in the movie, is that Ron's family won some money and in like a contest or something. And they took a trip to Egypt with the money. And they say that they're in the leaky cauldron in the movie and they say, oh, look at this, look at the newspaper. We just went to leaky cauldron, or we just went to Egypt. Ron also gets a new wand with that money. Okay, so that answers that question from last week. Ron does get a new wand. Yeah, his parents buy him a new one with their winnings. But they go to Egypt because one of the brothers is in Egypt and they go to visit him. Well, they get a family photo, rats on the shoulder in the photo or in the hands or whatever. And that's what Sirius sees, because when someone's going through there, hands off a newspaper and Sirius ends up with this newspaper. And so Sirius sees on the newspaper this rat, and it says, okay, this family has all these kids going to Hogwarts. And so Sirius is muttering to himself in the jail, he's at Hogwarts, he's at Hogwarts, meaning Peter, not Harry. And then the Minister of Magic is assuming, oh, he's saying Harry's at Hogwarts, I'm gonna go after Harry, but really he was going after Peter. So some of that is not as obvious in the book or in the movie as the book. Yeah.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah. So I feel like there's some things that are really missed that matter. In other books, I think that there's important parts, but this, I feel like the third one is the most confusing. There are so many gaps, I think, that just, that you don't understand why this man all of a sudden escapes Azkaban.
As we move into like, because the first book is short, the second book's fairly short, like both of them, they can be covered in a 2.5-hour movie. But as soon as we hit the third book and like move forward, there's just so many subplots, little details and stuff that just with the main plot and adding like, it's like some of those little details come around and become important. So just moving through the main plot, all those things get really confusing, especially like the fourth book and the fifth book too.
Yeah. They do a lot to, in a cinematic expectation is that you've got action scenes, and action scenes take several minutes, even though it's not moving the story forward a lot, just because of how cinema is set up. And so because of that, especially with the fourth one, you miss a lot of plot because they're doing all those little trials in the Triwizard Tournament. So that, I just wanted to clarify a little bit more about Peter in that capacity, and I forgot that element. So yeah, that's how Ron and Peter ended up together. So what's been going on with Hermione this year? We talked about her character flaws a minute ago, but she's trying to take on every possible class
Overachiever,
that a third year could take. They're given electives. They're allowed to pick and choose a few classes.
And she chose them all,
And the
right?
normal amount is like 2 to 3. Like 2 to 3 is like the normal amount of electives that a Hogwarts student will pick. And Hermione decided to take every single one that's offered. So divination, care magical creatures, arithmancy, runes. Is there another one?
She definitely takes 2 more than Harry and Ron. Definitely has 2 extra
And so we see her just showing up, right?
See her just showing
Unexpected,
up.
unexplained, and nobody knows
Everywhere.
how.
Just everywhere. All the classes.
And again, failed pedagogy. I mean, who would allow a child to just have this time turner? She could have done anything.
And also,
Yeah.
who's all her taking around stress? Like that is so
Where's
many
her guidance
classes.
counselor, right?
And 2 more hours of sleep she's not getting every night, basically, in a way. Like, it's gonna add up every 12 days, she loses a day of sleep because she's taking these 2 extra hours every 12 days, she's like getting an extra day. So she's overworking herself. Oh my gosh. And the boys are catching on, but not fully.
You're not super
Yeah.
clear on what's going on.
Yeah. And then meanwhile, we have the drama with Buckbeak. And Buckbeak is a good hippogriff, always cleans his feathers.
Yes.
However, Malfoy provokes him, and then we continue to know that Malfoy's family has a lot of power, and therefore Buckbeak has been sentenced to death. Another component that is missing from these movies is the strain on the relationship between Ron and Harry with Hermione, because Hermione is ultra stressed with her workload at school, but she also feels compelled to help Hagrid win his case. They don't show the hours that are spent poring over legal documents that Hermione spends trying to help Hagrid when she already has all this other work. So although she's lacking empathy for Harry and Ron, a lot of times she has empathy for other things. It's not that she never has empathy. It's just, it's not perfect.
Not with her peer group, but.
Not with her peer group. Yeah, it seems like with others.
She's maybe more
She-
competitive with them.
She assumes that everyone in her group is like her,
Right.
and when they don't live up to her standards of herself, they just seem stupid in
She doesn't
comparison.
have time for that.
Yeah, like why waste her time doing this when she could go off and do other things?
They all still love each other.
Right,
They really have that camaraderie
Yeah.
that they're gonna take care of each other no matter what.
yeah,
They balance each other really well.
They do.
Like, that's why I feel like if it was just two of them, like if it was just Harry and Ron, it would be a
It would never
complete
be the
mess.
same.
If it was just Harry and Hermione, a complete mess, like all of them are needed to balance it out.
yeah, definitely. And then the way that they do come back together as friends is realizing Ron says, no, I do need to learn how to help Hagrid with this case. And he does get convicted in the end to try and find out some of the legal ramifications to help Hagrid with the case. But in the end, he doesn't win. And that's disappointing for everybody. And we see that Hagrid sends Harry a letter with all these tear stains on it. And Buckbeak's been sentenced to death. And these
That's not
creatures
how
are,
it ends.
no, it's not. These
Goodness for that, right?
These creatures are Hagrid's downfall, right? The spider got him in trouble.
Yeah.
The dragon got him into a lot of trouble, got Ron into trouble. That's missing also from the movies too much, but Ron ended up with a dragon bite that gets him in the hospital. I mean, Hagrid's a bit reckless, right?
He's a bit childish.
Childish.
And I think that's why Hermione had such care for him, because she took on motherly.
That's a good point. So where Caitlin's saying that Hermione has no patience for her peers, she can look to someone with pity more than empathy, maybe. Maybe.
So she's more of like a looking down on someone than a, like, I don't know, Hagrid just seems so far below her level. Like, it's not, like with her, people of her age, she is like, she compares herself to them and just finds that she's better. With Hagrid, he's like older, but also just so below. Like, I feel like she can see him more of like a sympathetic way than like, let me help you because I really like, cared a lot.
She feels bad.
Okay, so I'll take back my word pity. I'll say sympathy. Much better, much kinder.
I think we all feel sympathy for Hagrid though. Like he's such a lovable character. You know, when he was sad about the sentencing of death, I mean, it breaks your heart, even if he did it to himself.
Draco doesn't feel that. In the first book, Draco describes Hagrid as a drunk when he first meets Harry. Because he sees Hagrid walking past the window of the robe shop, and he's like, oh, that like great oath, like he's the ground.
Don't you feel like he's judging him though, just on like his look, you
Yeah.
know, and then he lives in the woods.
And as they walk to their very first class, he calls them an oaf as they're walking. Oh, you've got this oaf teaching classes.
But like the nicest oath
So
ever, you
condescending.
know?
Yeah. Malfoy is continuing to show his prejudices again in this book.
He was almost disgusted that he was teaching a class, right?
Is this the book where Hermione punches Malfoy?
Yeah. Brilliant.
She knows the information, but not much about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where she punches him right before they go down to see Hagrid on the first go. Yeah.
I remember in the theater, people applauding when he did.
I felt like applauding him. Felt so good, right?
And she says that. That was good.
Well, I applaud you for being in the theater for the third movie.
No.
You were that-
Well, I mean,
you were that dedicated all the way back then.
Yeah.
well, your grandchildren
Oh,
too,
yeah.
you know, we.
They couldn't wait for the movie to come out.
That's
it, blame it on the grandchildren.
Until they were able to interview. And yeah, we took them to see the films. I love them.
Yeah.
Nothing like seeing it on a big screen,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Especially like the first time.
As much as I think Draco deserves a redemption arc and like how his character could have been like so much more like fleshed out, he definitely deserved that punch.
It's hard for you to get.
In the third book, like in the early books, he was a spoiled brat who didn't have any bite with his bark almost, but towards the end he changes as a person.
He was a lot more prominent in this movie.
Yeah.
He becomes like the first book and the second, well, especially in the movies, like in the books he gets mentioned like a little bit more, but he starts building prominence now because he's on the Quidditch team with like what that Harry is, and his family also starts to have a lot more problems too.
Well, and we see other scenes where Malfoy is getting his comeuppance too, because when they're by the Shrieking Shack and he's gonna tease Ron, saying, "Oh, is that your new family dream house or whatever?" And then Harry's able to bully him under the cloak. That's the scene I was telling you that makes me nervous. But yeah, I mean, he's a jerk all around in multiple situations.
Because you have to consider that his parents kind of trained him into that.
Yeah.
And I think the longer he was at Hogwarts and the more popular Harry was becoming, that he was under pressure from his family
I do,
to
To do something about it.
that was the with the Quidditch, okay?
Yeah.
You're gonna be a seeker and
Yeah.
I'll get you.
Show him who's boss type
Mhm.
thing, yeah.
And such a contrast for Harry. He has Malfoy who's antagonizing him in this one, but no one else is antagonizing him yet. We'll wait till next week for that, but like, it's really just Malfoy. Everyone else at school, that's just like his family. That's his happy place. That's where he's loved. And then the contrast, we continue to see him at home being neglected and abused. And part of the book talks about where at least most of the time the Dursleys left him alone. But when Aunt Marge came, she wanted him front and center where he could be seen by her and then she could pick on him.
Tortured.
And so she just relished in giving him the jabs. And, he just couldn't control his magic.
He deserved that one too.
Yeah.
It seems like, Harry doesn't understand all these things that are happening to him.
Right.
He's making this up as he goes. He's lived very sheltered, and he's kind of, I feel like he's mystified. It's just thing after thing after thing that comes up that he's having to deal with, and these other people are around him. Even though Ron and Hermione are close, but these other people that are around him are just clueless. Even Ron and Hermione. And isn't that the way it is in our lives a lot of times? We're going through crap, and even though there's people around you that have empathy, they really, nobody can know what you are experiencing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because he gets this drama with his family, so he escapes. Then he sees this dog he thinks is about to murder him. But all of a sudden he gets on this bus where he thinks he might die in a car accident. And then he gets to the hotel and the Minister of Magic is there and he's freaking out that he thinks he's going to get arrested or something. But everything was fine. I thought that was so funny for him that he, the minister gets, "Oh no, you're okay." But, well, last year you were upset with me because a house elf put a pudding on my aunt's head.
It really swapped two books. This is a book where the ministry and the public loves Harry. This one, they're like, "Oh, Sirius has escaped, poor Harry Potter, the orphan boy, we love him this year." Last year, no. The next year, no. It's it really changes.
Yeah, that sneaky boy putting his name in the goblet, right? There's all these circumstances. Yeah, that they just can't stay, behind Potter. Yeah, he's not always favored.
It was a bunch of sheep, pretty much. That's what they are. Especially the Ministry of Magic and the general population. It's very, very interesting how reflective of things. They just their opinions just fluctuate depending on what's popular at the time.
Very political,
Well,
right?
that's
Wishy-washy.
right.
Yeah,
It's such a reality, isn't it? That's how I felt.
they'll turn on a dime. Yeah.
Whatever the crowd
Harry
wants,
takes
right?
one slight turn off this path that they want him to be on, and suddenly he's the evil character to us.
Right.
Interesting.
Well, in later books too, or movies, the ministry, at least in the movies, the ministry gets real power hungry.
Right.
Like
They're real
what's
politicians.
They get
the
scared.
called? They order the fifth one. That one, like there's big posters to the Ministry of Magic on there, and there's like slogans,
They
stuff
get
like that.
scared.
And that's,
Is that what it
They
is?
get-
They're losing their
What
power.
happens in the fourth book scares them. I'm not gonna say what
Panic.
happens, but
Yeah.
something happens in the fourth book that terrifies the ministry, and they become like obsessed with keeping their control.
yeah.
And they're just grasping at any way they can have that power.
Which I feel like is shown by just Minister Fudge being so incompetent. Like, he's just so, like, in the third book, he seems so, like, just stupid. And then later books continue that.
Just naive to what the reality
He's
is.
he's a true politician.
Politician, that's the word.
Yeah.
He goes
So-
for what he does.
So we talked, the first week, was it Judy that said that, Hagrid was like a godfather figure for Harry? Did you say that? Or was it Jordana? I don't have no idea.
I think Judy might have said father figure, because he was
Yeah,
there
fun.
when he was the baby.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
When they brought him.
Yeah, and so we've seen these people kind of take Harry under their wing a little bit. And so we have Lupin doing that this year, and as Lee was talking, you know, almost to Lupin's detriment, he spent a little bit too much emotional energy possibly on this child, treating him like he's a memory of a former man. But still a happy time for Harry. He's getting a little bit more of his family bond because he's getting glimpses of characteristics of his parents and learning a little more details about who they were. He had the album from last year that he gained, and so he's piecing together bits about who he is in regard to being a Potter.
We have
That's special.
we have to remember that Harry was given no information whatsoever about his parents.
Yeah,
So who am I? You know, most of us can say, well, you know, we're this or that, or, you know, our father or grandfather or Uncle Charlie or whatever. And Harry was basically raised a blank slate.
But all the kids around him knew his whole history.
Yes.
The
Right.
only one that didn't know.
Yes.
that must be just a terrifying and just surreal
Really
feeling.
surreal, that's what I was
To,
thinking.
to know that everyone knows about you, but you almost like you've woken up from him having amnesia.
Right, you
Yeah.
have no memory of
Yeah,
anything,
who
but
am
everybody
I?
else knows.
And so getting to know Lupin has really helped him kind of blossom a little bit more, have a little confidence for who he is. But all through that, then it continues to uncover more and more truths that he doesn't understand. Like this whole book is helping to like bring to light the justice and what the truth really is. And so we see that with, yeah,
I saw that as an example of growing up. When you're a child, your parents are absolutely perfect. I mean, they know everything, they're right, they're best, okay. Then you hit your teen years and you start to question. Then you hit 20 and they don't know anything.
That never
And,
happened.
and then you get married, you have kids, and suddenly they're so brilliant.
So true, right? So true. Then you want their opinion on everything.
yeah. And so that theme of truth and uncovering the truth through this one, let's talk about omen versus prophecy. We haven't really talked about Trelawney too much, but we've got our teacups here. Who thinks she's a fraud? Not of us, don't raise your hand. I mean, like in the book, in the movie, who thinks she's a fraud? Yeah.
Hermione, of course, right?
Hermione thinks she's a fraud. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. They're very dismissive. Yeah.
What's good, she's going crazy.
She's
Yeah.
loony.
Yeah,
Yeah. She stays up in her tower.
yeah.
Mhm.
And she's got the power, she just can't control it.
Yeah.
It comes and goes when it feels like it.
Yeah. And goes more than comes.
Right. Totally gone, right?
Right. Right, yes, and we do find, sixth one? Yes, the sixth one, we do find out that she uses a specific place to hide her sherry bottles in the book. So yes, you're right, something is correct.
I can't remember what drink it was that she was drinking.
Yes, yes, yes. So she has to hide her sherry bottles.
You think she can't see because of the thick glasses that these other things.
Right, yeah.
Same glasses the bus driver was wearing.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny.
That's what my first thought when I saw her. I'm like, oh, she has glasses like the bus driver that was driving that crazy
That's a
bus.
good connection. So she looks into Harry's cup and what does she see? She sees the grim.
That can't be good with the word grim, right?
And what did Harry see already? He got attacked, right? Or not attacked, but he got
I
scared.
saw the dog.
He saw the dog, and so since that dog was scruffy. Oh, hi, Brown. Hi. How are you guys? Oh, you're on mute though. Hi, Kennedy. Hi. Hi, good to see you. You guys gonna have fun tonight? You guys have to go now?
Yeah,
We'll see you.
well,
Thanks
we'll
for
just leave you on mute and listen.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
So here he's seen this grim, but yet his trusted intellectual friend Hermione is like, this lady's a fraud. Harry's torn, right? Because he's scared on one hand, but on another hand, he's trying to just talk himself out of it. Like, no, there's no way this can be bad. But yet there's a mass murderer after him. So surely he's gonna die, right? There's someone who wants him. And he can't stay on the campus because he can't listen to instructions. He's wandering the castle and wandering to Hogsmeade. So he's up to no good a few times. He could definitely get murdered at this point, I guess. But he's also afraid of these Dementors. Are they just gonna suck his soul and then he's gone too? Like the Grim could be real for him. And so Omen versus prophecy. We don't see that many of Trelawney's predictions in the book, but McGonagall, or in the movie, but McGonagall assures the children, oh, don't worry. Trelawney always prophesies somebody's murder the first day of class. So she assures them.
That's how it goes around here, right?
So they show up to Transfiguration right after divination, and they're all just stone-faced, and she says, what's wrong with all of you? Welcome back from the summer. And they're like, we just had divination. And she goes, oh.
Happens every year.
Which of you is dying this year? Is basically what she said.
What does she say to Hermione? I didn't quite catch it. What does she say?
She
to
says that Hermione has no, like,
In her eye.
yeah, like, basically she has no gift for the sight.
Yes.
Okay.
Because Hermione.
I know Hermione didn't like what she said, but I didn't
fraud,
quite
and then Trelawney's like, oh, you just have no gift. And the lavender and
This is
Barty.
nothing you can study. This is nothing you can just be.
Which Hermione does not like.
Oh, no.
Because she thinks she can study her way out of anything.
She tried to study how to fly a broom. Like, she was.
I knew she didn't like what she had saw in her teacup.
Right. Yeah.
Hermione thinks something is a joke.
And so then, so I feel like we get all these omens from Professor Trelawney and this whole sense of like, okay, is it real? Is it not real? But then when Harry returns the crystal ball to the classroom and her voice changes, now he thinks, okay, maybe this is a real prophecy, not just an omen that I need to be scared of. This might be a true prophecy. He will return tonight. The one who betrayed the Dark Lord will reunite or whatever. And so that gets him panicked, but not knowing yet who this one is that's going to betray. He's assuming it's Sirius, and no, we find out later it's Peter. And so she does have this prophecy, and we do continue to find out more about her. That so when we get to movie 5, all we see is that she's tried to be kicked out of the castle, and Dumbledore says no, she gets to stay. I understand if she can't be a teacher, but she needs to stay. Please don't let me forget to inform you of more details when we get to 5, because the book does enhance that storyline a little bit better. But basically, she needs to stay for her safety. And so Harry now has this prophecy, and whether or not the prophecy is what determines how they handle themselves these next 7 hours getting through the night, or hearing that is what triggers Harry to act regardless, we see that Harry's determination to save Sirius is the driver for being reckless with this time turner over the next several hours. What does it mean for Harry now that he's uncovered this truth about Sirius? And I know I filled in some of those gaps, but they're in the Shrieking Shack, and he's figured out this situation with his dad's friends. What does this mean for Harry going forward?
He now has a connection. He now has someone who is
A
as
living
close,
connection.
as close as a blood relative as he could have. Someone who is able to tell him about his parents, explain things, how they loved him, what they were like. This is like giving him a storybook of who he is, where he came from.
Yeah, and before the very end, when they're just standing there talking, before the werewolf changes and all of that, Harry has a moment of hope, like, this is the man that's gonna take me shopping for my school supplies next.
He could live with him, right? Didn't he say,
Like,
come and live with
My
me?
life is going to change instantly. Will I ever go back to the Dursleys? I don't think so, you know? He had hope for the first time.
Almost a salvation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm out of there finally.
Yeah, somebody really loves me.
Yeah.
What, he had maybe 6 minutes?
Yeah. And that
6
was
minutes
over.
of a dream? Yeah. I mean, it's just so devastating for
What
the
it's
poor
taken,
kid,
I know.
what it's taken.
Yeah.
But Dumbledore continues to seem to have more information than Harry, because Dumbledore reassures him when he gets to the end, and like, well, an innocent man has been set free. Like, that's what's important. Not that Harry gets his way, but that the innocent is free. I feel like it makes Harry so frustrated that he can't understand everything. And I mean, that goes back to today's sermon with the mysteries and just Harry. And again, Dumbledore is not a God figure in this book, but there's moments where he shows glimpses of godlike qualities to Harry. And here Harry's like, I just wanted a family. And Dumbledore's like, but the truth is in your heart. Like, that's gonna have to be enough right now.
I feel like Dumbledore also goes for the greater good. He, instead of valuing, like, again, it's seen very much in later books, but like the greater good is that Sirius Black is free. Like, the innocent man is gone from Azkaban. But Harry, like, obviously he wants to like enjoy his life. Like, he's a person. Like, he's not just the boy who lived. Like, he's an actual person. Like, it makes sense that he wants his needs taken care of. So,
But individual preference isn't Dumbledore's.
Dumbledore, because of his background in life, is a politician. He's like he knows how to be a general. Like, he's very, like, he would prefer to see things go to his plan. And
Big picture.
Harry going to the Dursleys is his plan.
Yeah,
which
and it's a big picture.
Yeah.
It's a big picture that Harry doesn't see the whole story of yet. And that's a fault of Dumbledore, because although Dumbledore values the truth, he holds back for the sake of well-being of others, and also for just the whole picture. He keeps in mind the broad strokes and not the individual in who's getting it, like you said, a pawn, like in a chessboard. Yeah. And it's heartbreaking that Harry has to continue to be
go
like
back
this.
there, I know.
Yeah. But now he does have a friend. He has someone that he can connect with. Because the rat is now gone from Ron. With an extra bird cage today. I don't have a pigwidgeon, but I don't have a little owl for it. But there's representative there that, like, Sirius now is like taking care of Harry in such a way, like he gives Ron an owl, and he's like, that's not in the movie, but it's like all of a sudden now Sirius, even though he's not there for Harry constantly, he's writing him letters, and he's going to reach out to him in ways that he can by taking care of his friend and getting that broom and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
No need to bring that up.
That must be a super duper one.
That's a super duper broom.
It looks pretty fancy.
Yeah, yeah.
Very expensive. The chrome trim.
Never mind when he received it in the book. We'll just leave it as the story plot line in the movie. Just leave it where it is. I want to focus on Dumbledore for just another minute and read an excerpt from this book and then just a little chunk here. While Dumbledore's power, nope, wrong page. There we go. According to the Bible, we should exercise the same caution in our own world and in the lives of the people with whom we have relationships, as seen in Harry and Dumbledore's wariness with the ministry, realizing now that they're not all on the same page here because Fudge comes in, he's angry in the hospital, and Dumbledore's like, go do the time Turner thing, we're gonna get this innocent guy out. Paul wrote a letter to a church in the city of Corinth. These people had become Christians, but they were having all kinds of problems with each other in their worship practices. Paul goes over the problems they are having and addresses the specifics, but then he gets down to the heart of the message, which is love. And so very famous verse, love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoings, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never ends. I think that woven throughout here, we're going to see so much more of the love story with Harry's mother to Harry. We're starting to see now Sirius is going to have this love with Harry. But in this incident, we have to see that Dumbledore really does love Harry, even if he's feeling like he's a pawn, even if Harry isn't getting everything he wants out of Dumbledore. Dumbledore's not a magician, he's a wizard. Dumbledore can't just wave his wand and make everything right. There's still laws and there's still, it's not that magic is miracles in this universe of Harry Potter. Dumbledore is still limited. He's not a limitless individual, but he can love. And for him to sit there with Harry and say, we can't insist on our own way right now. We need to rejoice in the truth. And regardless of whether that hurts Harry's heart to know that he can't be with Sirius, it still helps us to move forward in the plot, and it helps us to see that there is a bigger picture here than just Harry being happy. And as heartbreaking as it is, that's kind of where we leave in this book.
That was also reinforced by Lupin as he's leaving.
Yeah.
Where Harry says it didn't, everything didn't matter. And Lupin says, what do you mean it didn't matter?
Yeah, that's right. Lupin gets all of Dumbledore's lines. I forgot.
Leave them all away.
Yeah.
It's like everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just how it's supposed to.
Right. It's so weird giving away lines and stuff. Like they give away a lot of lines, like good lines to Hermione, and
They gotta balance it out, right?
I guess it has to do with contractual obligations. I don't know.
the director said that his favorite character is Hermione, and that's why like
They gave her a little extra.
there's a lot to be about that.
Well, and also like making movies, you can cloak things so much more in movies. Like what I mean by that, like you don't have to say every detail.
Right.
Like that's more of an expectation.
Just be insinuated.
Yeah, and like those things.
Yeah.
So, and also you can't just bounce in movies. You have a limited amount of time. You can't spend 5 minutes with everybody.
And like Caitlin told me earlier, she's like, some people just go to watch the movies and they're not really huge fans, so they have to make it appealing to a broad audience. It's like a complete movie, even if you don't know anything before or after. So it's difficult to capture everything.
Yeah.
I have to make one comment to Lee because of the last 2 weeks you sported your shirt.
I know, and today, I was thinking of Marauder's Nap,
It's
right?
the day of the Marauder's Nap. Where's your shirt?
In the morning.
Laundry day.
I thought about it. I said, nah.
We were thinking that too when we saw the map.
Yeah, so that was funny. Yeah, because it was the perfect shirt. Well, he'll continue using his map, so we'll see it
Good,
again,
I'll
right?
be on
Okay,
next week.
Thanks for coming, everybody. And Lois and Midge and Ed, we had peppermint toad snacks today and blood lollipops. These are treats mentioned in the book that Harry sees when he goes to Honeydukes, when he's under his invisibility cloak and he's not supposed to really be going there, but he sees them. And then Ron and Hermione bring him treats back the first time when he didn't get to go at all. And I have a butterbeer mug over there, but we aren't drinking butterbeer yet. I am a firm believer that butterbeer should be consumed during the sixth discussion, because in the sixth movie, we actually watched them drink butterbeer, and I have glasses that look just like the ones that they drank out of, so I'm very excited that 6 of you get to use them.
Come early, come early.
And then we had Gilly Water, which is just bottled water with a label on it.
Make you roar like a lion.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't think any of that up.
No, I don't know what that's called, because they just do that in
I was
the
thinking
movie.
it was the jelly beans at first, but it's not.
It's never mentioned in the
It's
book.
never mentioned in
It's
the
not
movie.
like a thing. It's
Yeah.
What was cute in the
Yeah.
movie?
Maybe it's funny.
Yeah, it was just cute. It was a way to build a camaraderie with the boys.
Yeah.
The steep things from the pepper potion. So
Yeah.
Oh, when
it's
he sees-
weird, like
Yeah.
that's like a candy
Yeah.
potion, but then it's like.
It bothers the book readers
Yeah.
more than anything.
And,
Like, this
yeah,
is not
well, and
right.
that's where, but also, they don't really talk about that many snacks in the book, in the movies, whereas they mention a lot more in the books. And so if I'm gonna bring stuff, it's mostly gonna have to be book references and not movie references, so.
You just like show things, like they don't like.
Yeah, I probably should have brought a chocolate bar, but I don't mean, I thought peppermint toast would be fun.
They're very
Anyway, thanks for coming. Have a nice afternoon. You can stick around as long as you like, but goodbye, Zoom friends. Glad to see you.
Thank you.